There are nights I go to bed disappointed with myself. Everything a little, nothing right. I fall by the wayside, 'cause I've been treading water, and I did not even bother bumbling through. I always took the easy way until I went astray. But now it's time, I won't turn around. No, I won't turn around.
Hi everybody, it's Ben Ash from Sam Ash Music, and we have yet another live stream with our friends from Steinberg. And without further ado, let's just get into it and introduce our very special guest, Greg Ondo. What's up, Greg?
Hey, how are you doing, Ben?
Doing well. So before we dive into all the nooks and crannies of today's session, I do want to mention that we have a giveaway today, and it's a big one. We've been giving away headphones. They're great, but this one is perfect for those that are tuning into this, because we're going to be talking about how Cubase, you can use a lot of it to be great for composing. Hans Zimmer uses it. Tons of people use this. I just say Hans Zimmer all the time because I love Hans Zimmer, and you probably know who Hans Zimmer is, both Greg and everybody else who's watching. But here's where the kicker is. Whoever wins this giveaway is going to get a free license of Cubase Pro 10.5. Fully furbished. It's got the works. It's got the plugins. It's got everything. You don't need to get a single extra thing. So I just wanted to mention that because that is a really cool thing to win. So without further ado, Greg, what are we in store for today overall as far as what we're going to be learning?
We're going to take a look at some, like, for kind of utilizing Cubase for scoring and for composers. So one of the first things we could look at is, most people are pretty familiar with doing like basic MIDI editing. And, Steinberg has really kind of pioneered a lot of these concepts. So, we could see different tracks in time. We have unlimited numbers of tracks that we could use. And many people are familiar, if you've done sequencing, and Steinberg is one of the pioneers in this whole paradigm of kind of having a, your piano, it's often called a piano roll editor or a key editor. And what we wanted to do was kind of make this, a bit easier and a bit more musical, because, the original MIDI specification itself was done in, 1982. And just recently, within the last year, it's been kind of, augmented and updated for the very first time. But one of the things that we wanted to do before this is to make MIDI more expressive. So one of the dilemmas that you would have is when dealing with a lot of different controller changes. So let's say I'll just have like a little bit of a synth phrase. And when we look at our MIDI data, if you're not familiar with a piano key roll editor, we could see our notes indicated the pitch on the left-hand side, and we could actually see the pitch indicated on the note. We have our bars going across. So you see that if this note is visually higher vertically, that is higher in pitch. And this note comes in before this note. And these notes come in before these notes rhythmically. So if I wanted to make this a little more expressive, I'll just kind of take this one particular phrase and just kind of Now, one of the problems with traditional MIDI is that if you did a controller message, such as a pitch bend, so if I'm just going to draw in like a pitch bend, that this would do it for every single event on that particular MIDI channel. So now when we listen to it,
Weird.
And that's kind of a typical way of working. But what if I wanted a pitch bend just on one particular note? And that's what the MIDI specification didn't allow us to do. So we invented a technology called note expression. So when I double click on a particular note, I could have independent volume, panning, or pitch, or even resonance and cutoff for filters on a note. So I'm going to double click just on this E3 here and double click. I'm going to say we're going to do tuning. And what I want to do now is I'm just going to draw in tuning, but just on that one note independently. So
I like that you can audition it while you're drawing it.
Yeah. So as you just kind of click on notes, you could have this little speaker icon. So you could actually just hear what the note is as you do that. So now instead of every single note pitch shifting, I could just have that one note pitch shift independently. So let's take a quick listen to it. So you can make one note slightly flat, slightly sharp to kind of add that tension in a film scene.
It sounds very Blade Runner what you did there. And I mean that as a compliment. It's very cool how you can give it more life instead of making it robotic, because you are truly drawing it with your hand.
Yeah, and you could also play that in with a MIDI controller, but we wanted MIDI to be more expressive, because sometimes, people have that perception of MIDI is like, they download a MIDI file and it sounds very robotic and doesn't have a groove and it has a particular sound. So they kind of get around some of the traditional limitations of the MIDI specification. We've kind of incorporated this as what we call note expression. And because we did this, now we see different controllers. Like you may have like the Rolly controllers where you could have, kind of a non-traditional keyboard that you could kind of press and move an individual note sideways or move up and down after you press the note. That all works in conjunction with this. And also, part of the MIDI 2.0 specification is basically, these types of functions. And, instead of having to wait all these years, we just kind of implemented it as part of the VST specification.
So it's funny. I was going to say that I know I keep using his name, but he is amazing. But Hans Zimmer, when you said Rolly keyboard, I know he swears by that because he loves, not to promote Rolly, but hey, Rolly, nice keyboard, I guess. Nice little thing like that. But what I wanted to bring up specifically was the fact that Hans Zimmer uses Cubase. If you haven't heard me mention that a million times already from all these Cubase things we've done. But what I'm curious is, and this is just me as a fan, are there any specific features we're going to be talking about today or at all that Hans Zimmer likes himself that he went, wow, I can't
believe this is a big one for him, because, he always wants to kind of convey, the emotion in the scene. And sometimes if the technology from, 1982 hasn't been updated to, 2020, that could be hard to work with. So that's a big thing. And I know another big thing that Hans loves is just being able to see multiple controller lanes. So as I want to look at this, I could see not only pitch bend information, I could say a lot of times composers will be saying, okay, I want to see my modulation data and I want to see expression. So we could just see kind of multiple controllers here and be able to kind of draw those in and be able to see all of these. And this is how many of the composers get kind of, their sound, and, they'll spend hours just kind of tweaking MIDI controller info to make that work so that, they could bring in more instruments, like, on an orchestral piece to be able to, make it, get that emotional crescendo. So that's a big thing for a lot of composers, including Hans. So
very cool. Yeah, and if we come upon any other features, I'd love to know. Or if you know any composers in general who use Cubase, you just feel free to do a name drop. We have no shame here as musicians.
There's lots. It's almost like who doesn't run Cubase as a major composer.
Yeah, and what I just learned from talking with Greg is Greg knows his fair share of Cubase users. So if there is a famous musician, composer, whomever that uses Cubase, there's a very good chance that they have Greg on speed dial because Greg's got all the answers for them. So just a little fun fact. I didn't even know that because, again, Greg's the guru. This guy knows the ins and outs. He probably knows the coding for Cubase. That's how much he knows about Cubase.
So we can
So
see if there's any quick questions, and I can show some logical editor things. Maybe, and we always want people to ask questions in the live stream here, so it makes it a lot more interesting.
So I had a question. Just curious how much can you, like, composers we're talking about, yeah, if you have audio recording, you can have a bunch of files. How big can a project file get? Like, what is the maximum amount of tracks, the amount of plugins? Is there a limit? Is it limitless?
There's not a real fixed limit. You know, a lot of my composer friends, they're always like, we'll call it template bragging, you know, because composers will start off and they'll have like every sound that they think they'll utilize potentially in a project. I think Junkie XL's template the last time I was at a studio was like 3,200 tracks. I think Danny Lux was like 4,000 plus, you know, so, you know, and that way they know that, oh, I need a bell sound from this and this, and it's, you know, they spend a lot of time organizing it so that they're not sitting there searching for sounds when that moment of creativity is there. So that's not uncommon. And it seems, you know, it's like you go, oh, why do you need 4,000 tracks? You know,
That's
but
literally what I'm thinking. I am thinking, why do you need 4,000 tracks? It sounds insane.
Yeah. And they may use, let's say, you know, 80 at a time, but, you know, they just need to have those accessible. And one of the cool things you could do is just kind of come right over here and just do a search and type in oboe, and it will take you to your oboe track. So you could effectively kind of manage all of your sounds very easily in Cubase.
Well, that's awesome. I just want to make sure, I know we've been sidetracking a bit, but I do want to, is there more we can do with MIDI editing? I didn't.
Yeah, I'll show you something that's kind of an interesting MIDI editor. And a lot of times when you see composers, and I think Hans was the first one that did this, you may notice like he has this amazing touch screen to drive his Cubase. And a lot of composers have kind of, you know, done very similar things. And a lot of those are to kind of fire off keyboard shortcuts. But one of the great things you can do with this is utilizing something called the logical editor. So let's say if I have, and the logical editor is a bit different in that it's actually a kind of a conditional based editor. So I will just, let's say I have just a string part we'll listen to here. So it's something I just kind of put in really quickly. So we could set up different conditions, and we'll take a look. And sometimes the logical editor may look to be a little intimidating at first, but there's lots of presets to kind of work from. So let's say I wanted to take this part here and the low notes, this D3, I just wanted to copy those notes, leave them where they are, but have the same notes up an octave. So we could set up, and I made some presets here this afternoon. So we'll just say we're going to take the lowest note here. So what we're going to do is say we're going to do a function of inserting, and then we can choose just about any type of MIDI condition. So we're going to say type is equal to notes, and then we want to take the pitch. So we're going to say every D3 note, and we're going to take this value and raise up the pitch by 12 or an octave. So I will hit apply. And as we do this, we'll just see every one of those D3s will be doubled up an octave.
Oh, so instead of having to do like, so that's really great in the sense that, especially like you said, you're dealing with people who have these very organized projects that they have. And so instead of having to, like, which I'm guilty of, is I go and I highlight all the way across all the notes I want to copy. Then I have to put the marker in the right spot, which if on a big project where because there's so much stuff on a screen, you may have to minimize it and you may not get the marker on the right spot. This is almost a clear-cut way to make sure you have it exactly where you want it. And you're also talking about the notes you want. It kind of, funny enough, reminds me of like doing some kind of shortcut in Word or Excel.
Exactly.
Like you're having these rules.
It's kind of like a Boolean condition, you know?
Right. And I think,
dude, if it's this and this and this, do that.
Yeah, for those that don't know coding, Boolean is a whole thing. But long story short, I think this is brilliant that you're able to manipulate all of the MIDI mapping you've done without having so much as to drag your mouse anywhere. You're just saying, okay, I have these notes and I want to do these things with them. Now, I'm sure as far as doing this kind of thing, it can go nuts as far as specifications. But to show all those examples would be
I have a couple examples that I kind of set here. So let's say all these notes are the same velocity, and musically that could be not so exciting. So let's say I wanted to set up a condition where you can say, let's just randomize the velocities between, let's say, 40 and 120. So we see they're all the same velocities indicated by these red vertical lines. And now I hit apply, and it will just take those particular notes, and we can see kind of even the color change. So you get kind of, just taking something that was very straight, and then you can make it a little more interesting just using dynamics with velocity.
Play around from there, I'm sure. You can tweak those. Great. And then like with one button, you just got rid of it. And so if you didn't like it at all, you can fix it.
Yeah. And a lot of times the composers have these presets on their touch screens because they do this type of stuff so much. Another one we could do is, let's say I just wanted to take the middle note, the E3, and we could select these notes, and I want to basically select their position and to subtract it by a 16th note. So hit OK. And now we could just take something.
So you just shifted the whole rhythm with one click.
Yeah, but just of one particular pitch or a range of pitches.
Very, very, that's actually very cool. There was something I was curious about regarding this as far as moving stuff. I'll probably get back to another time. I'm thinking there's just a million possibilities.
Yeah, I'll show two more really quick.
Yeah, please.
But let's say I have this and I have a cello sound also loaded up. So I'm going to say, let's extract the low notes to a new part. So in my function, I'm going to say copy, and we're going to take the D3 notes and, basically take those to a new part. So I'll just make sure I have this. Okay. So, and I'm going to drop it down an octave as well. So I hit apply. And we'll go back out to our main project window, and it's created a new MIDI part for us. So I'll just drop this in. And so now when I look at this part, I'll just take a quick look at just this one particular part. I just see the low note. So a lot of people will start with maybe like a piano part, and then they orchestrate it based on the piano part, So it's really great for that. And one last trick I'll show you is, let's say I wanted to take every one of these notes here to velocity, and I'll just say, let's take the velocity of every other note. So I'll just say transform, we'll say type is equal to note, and we want to say every other note. We want to, every other second or third or fourth note, we're going to subtract 40 values from the velocity. So now we can see the blue lines here. So every other note is just down in the velocity. So again, we get some interesting dynamics. And that's all just, using the logical editor with a simple string part, and you can see how you can start to orchestrate. So
that's fantastic, even if you're not an orchestrator, because if you're simply just a musician and you say you don't have the privilege of either owning a MIDI controller or having room of a MIDI controller, that you can just program MIDI notes clicking around and then use the logical editor to go crazy in things you would otherwise do with a MIDI controller. Like, just that fact, I can't even, unless I played it accurately or I dragged them each individually I'd be like, I don't even want to make this song anymore. I'm tired. This is stupid. I don't want to. That's how I would feel. That's me as a musician.
Yeah.
But you just made it that much more simpler because, especially in equalizing and like a big thing in music is side chaining. And sometimes it's important that certain notes that are on certain beats are muted or compressed a certain way. So you're basically doing this in such a mathematical sense of, okay, this is where I want those notes to die out or come back in. And I'd be even more curious if, other than velocity, if you can change other parameters at certain parts. Like, can you change panning? Can
Sure.
you change?
Yeah, you could select every note and, you know, pan it randomly. You know, so you could say, take every one of these notes, you know, every E3 and randomly pan it. And pan it randomly within a specified range if you wanted to.
That's nuts.
So you can see kind of with the logical editor, it's just, you know, once you kind of get into it, it's just a real, you know, it gets into those like situations where it's like, oh, I'm in trouble and wouldn't it be cool if I could do this, but I probably wouldn't approach it because it would take so long and there's a chance of me making 12 mistakes to get there. But the logical editor will execute it perfectly every single time.
See, the thing that I can't help but love is the fact that you've basically made the logical editor, in a sense, a part of, like, it's truly a musical instrument, many would argue. But I think much like how like if you use an old synthesizer, a synthesizer is really just one singular note that you tweak using the modules. That's all it is. And so this, in a way, is a synth. I mean this loosely, a synthesizer in the sense that you can
for MIDI data.
No, right. It's a perfect example. It is a synthesizer for MIDI data, which is a bold thing. And if I think more musicians see it as such, the crazy ideas they can come with just what their selections are in the logical editor could create things nobody expected, because one, maybe people don't have the time or the patience for it. And now it's like, okay, well, if I was going to do a song and I wanted to pan everything this way and then this way and this, forget it. Oh, logical editor can do it in literally 2 seconds with just a few clicks here and there.
Yeah, and you could assign your own keyboard shortcut to just execute a logical editor preset. So bam, done.
So yeah, I mean, that feature alone for musicians, let alone composers. I know this is composer focused, which obviously this would be huge for any composer. But if you're a musician and you're looking to play around with MIDI in truly unique ways, evenly to your specifications or randomly, you have that option much more easy than you would with anything else. And you can play around with it. You can, and it's not like if you do all of the work, you then have to undo it or you have to save a separate project. It's, oh, I don't like that. Delete that line. And then it's back to normal.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's less risk, less time wasted, and you get a great amount of stuff out of it, which is awesome.
Yeah, I'll show you one thing you mentioned, you know, and something that we see is, you know, laptops are incredibly powerful and people, you know, want to realize their creativity at any time. So we actually, you know, and a lot of times you may not have your MIDI keyboard with you. So we actually can give you like a software MIDI keyboard so you could use your computer's keyboard. So if I just say QWERTY, so you could just kind of play and be able to, you know, have a MIDI controller using your computer keyboard. So, you know, if you're like on the subway, you're riding a bus, you're just, you know, stuck in a hotel, you don't have your keyboard, but you want to be creative, you could just have your own kind of built-in MIDI controller wherever you are. So, you know, if you're on, you know, any situation, you could just simply turn that on and get your idea out.
Simple. And what's great is that, unlike other things like we've said, like I've used GarageBand in the past, and I don't even want to talk about using the keyboard as a MIDI controller, but one of the things we'd be afraid of is, well, if you're going to use that, you're not going to get any of the velocity. But we just said you don't have to worry about that because changing the velocity is so much easier and now much more expressive. So
yeah, and there's a velocity control kind of even right here, so you could vary it as you're inputting different notes on the right-hand side.
You guys think of everything. Yeah, I think we covered a lot with just MIDI editing.
Yeah, so we could take a look maybe see if there's any chat questions, and we'll take a look maybe some expression maps next.
Yeah, if anybody is watching, we're happy. Like I should have posted this earlier. It's okay, I didn't. But Ask us any and all questions. We're happy to answer, because that's this. We're just doing a fun show. You're watching us, but it's not just watching. You can communicate with us. You can talk to the stars of this show. We are happy to address the audience. So we've got a lot to uncover. This is a very cool program. We're just showing you how these techniques work. It just so happens in Cubase, and it just so happens these features are very great for anybody who's looking to be a composer. So if you're looking for a great DAW, Cubase might be your option. So keep watching, because maybe all the questions you ever had about mixing and editing as a composer, or even just as a musician, we might answer those questions just by talking. And if you still think we haven't addressed your question, ask the question. We'll put it up on the screen. We'll talk about it. We'll address you directly. So all that being said, let's go on to our next topic, which is, the next topic, because we kind of talked about logical editor within MIDI editing. So we did the logical editor. Now let's talk about expression maps. So pray tell, what is an expression map for those that don't know?
So many of us that have like orchestral instruments, realize that like a violin or an oboe can play back with different styles of articulation. So, how you would bow, whether it's going to be like, very smooth and legato, or you do, very much where it's like, where it's very short staccato or pizzicato. So as you work with orchestral instruments, you may load up a violin sound, and you may be able to hit a key on your computer, on your MIDI keyboard, to switch between different sounds. So, you hit this key and the notes play back legato. You hit another key, it's doing, pizzicato or trills. So you have like a lot of different levels of expression. And when we worked with composers, I remember when we were doing kind of some research with this with some of our film composers in Los Angeles, we would actually see that they had spreadsheets to keep track of all of their different sounds. So, to do one violin sound, some of them would have like 16 or 20 different instruments and different tracks just to kind of get all the available sounds. And it'd be like, 2 notes here, 3 notes here, 1 phrase here, 2 notes here. And each of the tracks would be a different kind of articulation. So we saw that and it was like, oh, that's kind of a really bad workflow. So we said, we could fix that. So we came out with something called expression maps. And these are maps that allow you to see what articulations are available for different instruments. So in my string patch here, I could see that, I'm going to have trills, spiccato, trills, whole tone, half tone, tremolo, pizzicato, espressivo, legato, and some libraries could have up to, 40 different articulations. So instead of having these on individual lanes, we could just go to our articulation editor, the articulations here. So let's go ahead and just listen momentarily to this a quick Schubert piece, and we'll listen to kind of the, ensemble as a whole. And let me just rewind that. So I'll go ahead and just solo the violin. So while it sounds okay kind of by itself, maybe I want it to be perhaps how a violinist would approach it. So at this point, we'll start from the beginning. So we have legato strings. So for these short notes, I think it's 16th or 32nd notes, I want those to speak perhaps a little better. So I'm going to just say, draw in a pizzicato, and we could play this in real time with a MIDI controller, or just kind of arrange it after the fact. So what it's going to do now is, instead of going to having these notes on a separate independent track, it's just going to switch the sample that's playing. And let's say I want these to be pizzicato.
Cool.
So at this point, you could, go through and have, the right articulation. So you're not making one string sound that kind of maybe works in some songs, but not in the other. And most of these libraries, I think just about all the libraries available now will have this capability, and these expression maps are kind of freely available so that you could, have as highly inaccurate kind of MIDI sequence, as possible, so that, if you're composing for someone that, this way you could do a mock-up, or kind of a full score and be able to have that level of, take advantage of all the available articulations and sounds that are in the libraries that you have. So sometimes, people I find are using, 20% of their investment of, when they're working with orchestral libraries, because it's so hard to actually access those other sounds. But this just simplifies that entire process.
That's awesome how quickly it is to just little things like even pizzicatos, instead of having to go from menu to menu to menu to menu, it's right there at the bottom, just right there. And you just like any automation type thing, you draw it in and it's golden. And so I do love that this program has, instead of multiple boxes and menus and things like that, which many DAWs have had in the past, you're negating that going forward to make it so that you never have to open up multiple windows. You don't have to click the tabs at the top if you don't have to. So no, it's awesome. I love that this feature for expression maps. What's the wildest thing? I'm just gonna throw that at you. What's the wildest thing you could do with expression mapping?
One of the things that's really unique is, like, if we're, let's say we're doing our mock-up here and now we need to print out the score. So I could actually just go right over here to my score editor, and I'll just put this into page mode. And what we notice that as we do this, that it's actually written in the articulations in the score for us. So, if you do a pizzicato in a sequence, it'll just say pizzicato here directly in the score.
Is this Dorico?
No, this is in Cubase. So these same expression maps, because they make so much sense for notation users, that same technology is also in Dorico, our notation program. So because it allows you to get all the different sounds.
Forgive me for interrupting. There was one of the comments is there was a person curious how you run Dorco inside Cubase 10.5. Whether or not you can, I don't know if that's something you want to go.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dorico and Cubase are basically two separate programs at this point. When Dorico first came out, it's kind of an overwhelming task to come out with like the most powerful notation program. So on a first initial release, it didn't have like every single feature. So like the first one didn't have chords or percussion notation or like tablature for fretted instruments. So we let the Dorico team rather just, did an amazing job of, bringing those features, into the program for like, day-to-day functionality. And instead of kind of cheating and, it's like, oh, we did a percussion notation, but it's kind of, it's 20% there. And the next version, it'll be like halfway full. And the version after that, it'll be 80% full. And then by version 3.5, it'll be fully realized. So what the Dorico team has done is actually just say, we're going to, when we implement a new feature set, it's going to be full and complete. And so that's taken a little bit to, and now that at version 3.5, it is, all the kind of core functionality that people need is there. So I think we're going to start seeing more integration between the two. And we have a lot of people, Alan Silvestri, who's currently kind of goes back and forth between the two programs. And I think he just copies and pastes his MIDI data from Cubase into Dorico. And, I think, it worked very well because he did Avengers. I think that did okay financially last year.
I think it was all right. I've heard that. I've heard that movie before. So like we said, name drops galore, but it really goes to show that Cubase is a program the pros use, not just that kid in the garage. These are people whose literal livelihood depends on this program doing everything they need to and then some. So the reason that you heard, like I always joke that Cubase is the reason probably Hans Zimmer came up with a sound from Inception. So thank you, Cubase, for that. You're easily one of the biggest memes of at one point. But and then Alan Silvestri is just a monster composer in his own right, one of my favorites. And so it's really become, it seems, the go-to for composers. Forgive me, I never know how to pronounce her name, but the one who did the Joker,
Hildur, yeah.
Hildur, I'm not even going to pretend I know how to pronounce that last name for fear of insulting her or anyone that knows her. But she won the Oscar for Joker for best score. What program did she use? Cubase.
It's Cubase, yeah.
In a sense, Cubase is arguably award-winning. Like, obviously, I don't know if you have Grammys or Emmys or Oscars in your offices per se, but there's probably like a little asterisk somewhere that says, couldn't have done this without Cubase.
Yeah.
So
a lot of our users do, and that's the important thing. So
there you go. And so talk about testimonials, honestly. But I think it's so cool that all these features are, like, when you see these features, it's like learning about a new guitar pedal or hearing like, oh, well, a guitar pedal sounds awesome. You know who plays that pedal? That guy. That's how they made that record. So for music nerds like us, this is cool.
Yeah.
So whatchamacallit? So, I mean, speaking of scoring, we've been talking a lot about scoring, and I'll reiterate, if you have questions, please ask us questions. We love answering questions, because if you're going to rewatch this later, we won't be able to ask your questions live. We can still answer your questions either by contacting people at Steinberg or watching Greg's YouTube show for Steinberg that he does on the regular, or Sam Ash Associates, however. But if we can answer something that we're talking about here, please ask. So speaking of scoring, though, this is something that some DAWs do right, some DAWs don't do great, and some that don't do it at all. I'm not here to say which ones do or don't, but one thing that if you're going to score music, you got to do it to a picture. You're not just no composer, unless they are doing something experimental, ever just makes music and then sees if they can fit into the video. No, they do. They have to watch the video, and it's all about timing, and it's all about placement. It's funny. I'm not even, oh my God. I can't believe I'm mentioning this. My wife's going to crack up, but I was watching, of all shows last night. Do you remember the sitcom Step by Step? Okay. So my wife's been on a kick of that lately. She got me into it. It's actually not terrible. I didn't hate it. I actually kind of like it. But the thing that I found interesting on a scoring perspective is that if you watch the intro, the theme song, first of all, the theme song's bonkers in the sense that it just seems like it's going in all these different places and choices of like gang vocals, and there's a guitar solo that goes into a violin thing. It's weird. But if you watch it, it's clearly someone who got the video and then had to make music to the video, because there's no way the video editors are like, okay, we'll take your song and then we'll make all this footage cut up. Maybe they did, but it seems almost like there are certain hits that happen when there's cuts and people who show up. But yeah, my wife will get a kick out of me bringing up Step by Step on a live stream. In any case, I see we've got some geese, and I see we've got some faders, and I see we've got some video footage. So let me make this screen bigger so we can see what we're talking about. So what makes Cubase unique as far as scoring to a picture?
Yeah, so, we have a video track, so you could just import the video track. If there's audio embedded in a video track, that gets extracted as its own audio track built right in. So, and as we navigate in our timeline, we could see the video update frame by frame. One of the things that's very unique is this concept of, we do this on a transport where it's called use video follows edit mode. So I will just kind of double click on an event here and say in our MIDI editor, bring this up. And now as I move an event on the timeline, we can notice that the video will update frame by frame. So when you're talking about getting that, musical cue just perfectly aligned, you could do that. But you could even take an individual MIDI note. And at this point, just say, okay, I want to take this note and make sure that that note starts at that transition and be able to, surgically place that note so it's exactly where you need it to be. So events in the timeline, events, in the editors, a MIDI sample, all of that stuff is incredibly easy to do with what they call edit mode. Now, creating tempo maps is always problematic as well. So if, let's say I want to start this scene right here where we see the hands on the computer keyboard, and I need to get like an even number of measures between like visual cues. So at this point, I could switch tools. So I just right click and we have what we call a time warp tool. And I could say, this is where measure 32 starts. Or right at, let's say that's where measure 36 starts, right where you see Florian. And I need, at this point in time, I need it to be 4 measures from that point to this point. And what I do is I just simply move measure 40 to that point, and it calculates the tempo change so that you can have 4 measures of steady music at different tempos to fit exactly with the video. So you can say from this scene to this scene, I need, 2 measures of music. I need 8 measures of music, or I need 7 measures and 3 beats,
So you're making it so there's a lot less guesswork. So you can, because God knows I've done this once or twice, just editing videos and trying to get the music to time right, but I have to change the video. But you can't always change the video. You don't have that luxury.
Yeah, and a lot of times, that's the last thing that the video people want you to do. It's like, they gave you a tool that was going to be, and that's fine for, they don't want you to modify their video because that's what everything is based upon.
Because that's the thing. You can't, there are people at the top that pay people to do video and they pay people to do audio, and they want one job done and be done, and that's it. They don't want to have to go, oh, well, the music guy said they couldn't do this because you need the video shorter or long. No. They're not going to pay the video guy to do it again. They want the video guy done, give that video to the audio guy, be done. And so if you, as a composer, can be like, give me whatever, bring it. Bring that video footage to me. I'll work with it easily, no sweat off my brow. So it's great that you make it so that you're not fighting with the video or trying all this like shifting left and right and trying to make it perfect. You're showing that there are these tools that make it so it will find a way to cohesively fit into the parameters of what you're given.
Yeah. And along those lines, it's kind of the inevitable thing that there will be a picture change, and someone's going to edit something out. And then, all of a sudden you're like, oh, do you have to wait for the video to be uploaded? Do you have to do, wait overnight for it to be done and then start working on it fresh? But, if I could put just like marker tracks here, like of where the in point and out point is, and we could have the time code embedded directly in the video. And I could just kind of double click with my range selection tool, or just, let me get my rate modifier key. So I could just select a particular range. So let's say I'll watch this scene here. So we'll see kind of video. So we'll say they're at the park. They're going to be doing this. So, and if I needed to actually, cut out this particular scene, I could do kind of a global range, and then I could just hit Shift X, and that will cut out everything that was in that range. So if there was a picture cue, and this happens, to the best film composers, where they try really hard to not have a picture change when it comes to me, but it's going to happen. At that point, you could do the basic global cut, including the video and your MIDI and audio, and just have all that information preserved for you. So you can just kind of come right over here. So there, that whole amount of time, the video, the audio, the MIDI, the marker track is all done. And they go, oh yeah, sorry, we didn't mean that edit. You go, okay, just undo.
So that's awesome. Because this is what I'm starting to see as a repeating theme is nothing in Cubase is permanent unless you want it to be. Like you were showing with like the logical editor, that you can do things like tweak this with your parameters. But again, if it's like, okay, the panning was terrible, I don't want any of the panning I just did, done. So here, unlike many projects I've done, in order to preview it in such a way, you do have to cut it out and then probably save it because you don't know if it's going to be permanent. And then you have two versions of the same project. But here it's arguably still there, but you've circumvented it. You've basically said, okay, we're not going to deal with all this stuff that I did. No, none of this music, none of this video footage, none of this automation. We're just going to make sure that we can watch it and then skip right past it and keep going. And then,
and then when you get the real video file, as long as you have the right in and out times, which someone will probably tell you that much quicker than they could render the new video, upload it, you download it, you can kind of solve the problem and look like the hero.
So how long has this feature been on Cubase? Because I'm just curious when that moment was where Hans discovered this and went, oh my God, you just saved me so much hard drive space and you just saved me so much time editing.
I think the picture edit is kind of been in for a long time. So, or just being able to kind of cut out different sections, and over time we added the capability of kind of creating the tempo maps easier, in the edit mode to move stuff, and it's just kind of, and we hear from our film composers because, they work under incredibly tight deadlines, and sometimes they will just get a project and they'll have, incredibly short time because something didn't work out, So I had one film composer. One of my favorite quotes I've ever gotten is like, he told me once that each mouse click cost him $12. So he's like, if you could do something that was 5 mouse clicks in 2, it's like golden, if something that was 3 mouse clicks, 1, perfect, because that's the kind of speed that they need to work at to, because their deadlines are, and it's a fascinating topic to talk to composers. We did a video interview with Hans, and you can see it on Steinberg channel. And one of the questions that didn't make it into the final edit, we just asked is like, the question I asked was, how do you know when you're done? Because you keep adding and adding and adding and tweaking. And he's like, and he just laughed and he's like, when the director comes and says, give me the music, that's when I know I'm done, because otherwise you could just tweak it, forever.
But to any of those people out there who are simply a musician and don't record, I don't think you understand that is every musician's plight. Like, I would honestly bring a musician or any songwriter, if they go, song's done, bring them to therapy because there's something wrong with them. Because I don't think I have ever been totally okay setting something and being done with it. I'm always like, I could have done that solo better. Or you know what? Maybe if we made the song faster or slower. I mean, for goodness sake, look at George Lucas. He wasn't happy when Star Wars was finished and he had to do things.
Go back and tweak it again. Yeah.
Right. So that's every musician. We all deal with that where we're just saying to ourselves, okay, I think it's almost done. But like Greg said, it's done when someone says, you're done. I need this. Stop it.
Yeah. And I have a lot of musician friends that don't listen to their albums and don't listen to their compositions and recordings because of that. Because they know they're going to relive every single decision that they made on it. And then like, once it's kind of released, they're like, I'm not going to listen to it ever again. It's done. I'm moving on, because, it's a really interesting aspect.
And just think of it like this, guys. When your favorite musician says, I don't want to play the hits anymore, it's probably because of that. It's probably because they wrote a song, they didn't think anything of it, it became a huge hit, and they started playing it a lot, and people wanted to hear it a very specific way with a very specific solo, and they're like, ugh, why did I record it like that? I wish I had done this solo differently. Why is it so hard? Why did I make the most difficult solo ever? Literally, guitar players say this all the time, like, why did I make such a difficult solo that I now have to play live perfectly? So
yeah, I remember I got to record a guitar festival that Joe Walsh was performing at, and he came out and started to play Rocky Mountain Way, and he's like, well, I know if I was, if I knew that I'd be playing this song like this many years later, I would have written a different song, So I'll show one more thing with some scoring here. Let's see if I have a sound. So let's, I'm going to we have an interesting concept because when we have different events that are kind of based on the bar and beat or versus the actual time that's like synchronized with a particular event in a video. So let's say I have just a quick cymbal kind of roll. So I'm just going to record this and we'll just see if I get the video to cooperate here. But, as we have right. So, but what you could do if you have kind of different components in the video, in the video window, I'm just going to revert this project real quick because we probably sometimes in demonstrations you can do all sorts of fun things. All right. So let's say I have, and I'm going to place this track in the record. And let's say I'm just like during a transition scene. This is Hamburg. Anyone's interested? Beautiful city. So say I just put that symbol in to kind of match the cloud. So we do this. I watch it again. Oh, here's symbol. So as we do that, let's say someone's like, yeah, it'd be cool if the music was like faster. So let's say at this point, I'm going to just change the tempo from 120 beats a minute to 90 beats a minute. So I do that. And so now that I changed the tempo, that's probably not going to align with the cloud anymore because that kind of is based on the bar and beat position. So to kind of solve that problem where I want to lock that particular note to get the correct tempo here where we were. So where this note is going to be always at that particular moment in time. So we'll see it come in here. I'm going to place this track into what we call linear mode. So I'm click right there. And now this event will always be at that moment in time versus the bar and beat. So I'm going to slow down the tempo. We'll hear all the music slow down. But that symbol to match up with the cloud will still be there in time. So you could have particular parts that are kind of aligned with visual cues that should always play back at that moment in time with the video, or you could have them, be following the tempo if you wanted to. But the ability to kind of split those is really important in film scoring.
That's very cool. I love that. What's crazy about this, and it's not to make this sound bad by any means, but the features you're showing aren't incredibly flashy per se, but they're necessary. These are things that it makes it so much less daunting to take on a task. And I'd be hard pressed to see why composers, nothing against any other DAW, but these are features that any composer should say, oh yeah, I need this. There's no other DAW I need because this is going to make it so much easier on my life. Remember, some of us still have wife and husband and kids and pets and responsibilities that, yes, it might be nice to be a multi-million-dollar composer, but we don't all have that luxury, and we're still composing music for tons of stuff. So it'd be nice to be able to do your work, get it done quickly, be able to do other stuff, knowing that, okay, the project I saved is great. I know I only have to save one version of my project. I have to keep saying that because if you haven't done any mixing, engineering, or production of music like I have, in the small amount that I've done, I probably have song final, song final, final, song final, song final, 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 X 2 3. And so that's the thing, is that you're making it so you're solving issues we take for granted with
yeah, we try to solve problems before people realize that it's a problem.
Right. And a lot of it's things like, okay, this is because you don't have to save multiple projects, you save disk space. because you don't have to remove it to preview something. You can always bring it back in because you have this MIDI logical editor thing. You don't have to worry about doing things manually. You can do things all at once within seconds rather than within a half hour realizing it doesn't work and then having to redo everything unless you can't undo it, and now you got to manually. I digress. The point is, there's a lot that you're solving with these for composers. Again, this applies to anybody who's doing music, but composers, as we all know, have a much more daunting task usually of having multiple tracks they have to take care of, blending multiple tracks, because while rock bands, it's maybe a couple tracks for guitars and vocals and drums, and so maybe total at 20 tracks tops. Like you said, some of these composers have 4,000, not 400, which would also be a huge amount, 4,000.
Yeah.
So that it's great that you're making less daunting projects a possibility for many musicians and composers. But if again you're a composer and you're watching this live or otherwise, this may be the thing. Who knows? Maybe you might actually win Cubase Pro 10.5 in about 5 minutes. So you'll be able to see for yourself how great this program is. But we have one other important thing. Forgive me first. Before we move on to another topic, one, do you, whomever's watching on Facebook or YouTube, have any questions that we can answer for you? And Greg, do you have anything else you can share as far as scoring to picture? That is a very cool feature, a unique feature, one that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of kind of the core fundamental things that, you know, you do, you know, like day in and day out. But, you know, the last thing we'll take a quick look at is, you know, let's say I have a bunch of virtual instruments and everything is really custom tailored for my studio. So let's say I have just like a quick piece here. We'll just jump it in here. So let's say I have a nice piece and I needed to pass on all of the different parts as audio files so that anyone using any program can, you know, load them all in. They're going to be the same length. They're going to be the same sample rate, bit depth, but I wanted to kind of archive this in an intelligent way. So we have kind of a technology that we could do called batch export. So I could take, go to my file menu to the audio mix down. At this point, we could just say, instead of just making a single file like a stereo or a 5.1 mix, I'm going to say, let's take my stereo out, my effects channels, my instruments, all of my audio channels, and we could just come here. I'll just give it, we could have different naming schemes as well. So we could say, I wanted the channel name and today's date or the project name and add a counter. Because, you know, file naming can be like really critical for composers. You know, it's like, I need the date in this format. I need it separated by this. So when we put it into our system for a music library, that, you know, all that formatting is done. So we're going to take all these different files of this particular project. And I'm going to say after this, we could create a new project. And this will take just a minute here. So this is going to, you know, take each individual component, make it an equal length file so that, you know, Homer Simpson using any program in the world could start them all at the same time. And it will play back, you know, rendered audio files, you know, all done in one mouse click so that you don't have to do it one by one by one, you know, and when you have hundreds of tracks or thousands of tracks, you know, it's just kind of prone to error. We're going to leave one part out. So now we just do our batch export and it's going to create a new project for us. And here's our stems. So it's kind of an instant stem maker. So you come over here, you can listen to and see all of your different files as stems. And that way you could just hand that to, you know, the film company, to, you know, a label, so that they can't really understand exactly how you got there. You know the recipe for the dish, but you don't really share that recipe with other people because you want to, you know, still have your kind of intellectual property as an engineer, as a composer, so that all of your different components will be just kind of laid out for you right there. So that's just going to make equal length audio files of everything that was in this one particular project.
Dang. Yeah, no, I love that you can do that, because a lot of transferring files back and forth is just the worst if you're working with people. And I just think it's great that you can easily, like, that whole thing took less than a minute to explain how to export stems. So I can't stress this enough. I love that I'm hearing all these very simple, yet, like, again, none of this is like, wow, look at what it did. It's just like, oh, that made it so. Your reaction should always be, oh, that just made things so much easier in my life.
Yeah, simple solutions to complex problems.
That's all it is. Forgive me. Is there, because we're at the top of the hour?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much through with most of my things, unless we have some questions, and we'll do the giveaway.
Yeah, well, if anyone has a question, by all means, please ask, because we've got less than a minute. I mean, technically it's over, but we've got time. If you guys have questions, we'll answer anything and everything Cubase related. It doesn't even have to be about what we just talked about. So if you have a question, please let us know. I mean, this is a dense program. Greg knows it all. He can answer nearly every single question you have.
And if this is the first video you're watching, we've also done one on kind of like EDM and hip hop, and one on working with bands. And you could see, that Cubase is like really strong at all those different scenarios.
So essentially, if you're a musician looking to record pretty much anything, we either have a video for it, or we'll have more videos. We hope to do more of these in the future. And maybe and this is something that might be interesting. Perhaps we can take requests if you guys want us to do a class on something specific.
We'd love to.
You know what? Oh man, I've been trying to learn how to do this kind of thing. And everyone's like, yeah, you know what? I've been trying to learn how to do that. Greg will probably be able to come up with a class in that respect. And Greg's, like I said, nothing stumps this guy. He knows it all, can do it all. But I guess since we have a very quiet, I don't know why it's very quiet, but if nobody has any questions, that's okay. We'll just announce the winner. We'll say our goodbyes, all that kind of stuff. Greg, before we announce the winner, is there anything else you wanted to talk about that composers should be aware of if considering to get Cubase?
I think, Cubase has kind of a really strong workflow that, allows you to kind of, not be inundated with features. The power is there when you need it, but it's not in your way when you're kind of just have that little spark of creativity. So, like one of the great things you could do is, let's say like I wasn't recording and I just played some MIDI notes in. I go, oh, that was the best theme of all time. We have this thing called retrospective record. So I could just click there. And even though I wasn't in record, it captured it for me. So, so we're always thinking about those types of little scenarios,
Oh, my goodness. I can't tell you the amount of times where, and I'm going to tell you one thing. As much as I love all DAWs, this guy is my best friend, because when I need to record a guitar part, I don't think I remember the last time I wasn't recording just to my recording app when playing guitar, because the amount of times in my life where I'm jamming and I'm just like in the groove and I just heard something that my fingers played by accident, and then I go, oh, wait, okay. And then I find my recorder, and this is before I had recording app on my phone. I'm like, okay. Oh, I just lost it.
What was that? Yeah. So the best ideas always come when you're not in record, and it's just, and it's total like, it's like, oh, you're not under pressure. You're not in record. It's like, oh, just do this. And it's like, oh, I had the best theme ever. Oh, just activate retrospective record. So a lot of our composers kind of joke. It's like, yeah, I haven't hit the record button in years. It's just all retrospective record constantly.
So I'm glad that we actually went on that tangent, because we do have a couple questions. Donald was asking, how do you edit in Wavelab from Cubase? Well, that's a great question you asked that, because in our next episode, we're going to be tackling Wavelab. So I would highly recommend you make sure that you are following us on social media at Sam Ash, because when we get the date finalized, you
I
can
think it will be in about 2 weeks, but a quick answer is you could actually select your audio file and just choose edit in Wavelab from your audio menu. And that will launch Wavelab directly from your Cubase. And when you do the export audio mixdown, one of the great things that you have the capability of doing as what's called a post process is you could do a mixdown and just say, oh, have it automatically open the mixdown audio file into Wavelab.
So while that's a little teaser for you, Donald, we're hoping that you join us in a couple
Yeah,
weeks.
about 2 weeks. Yeah.
So what I would recommend is follow us on YouTube and Facebook at the very least, because that way you'll be able to see when the live stream comes up, as far as being able to set a reminder or to RSVP, so that way you do not miss it. Chances are it'll probably be this day and time, like it'll be Thursday at 5 p.m. in 2 weeks.
Or Wednesday, I think. Yeah.
Oh, Wednesday. Is it Wednesday today?
Yeah, it's COVID, so you never know. It's any day that ends with Y. It's all the
I
same.
Every day is just blank day. It might as well just be day. Yes, I'm sorry. Wednesday at 5 p.m. in 2 weeks, I believe, will be the case.
Yeah.
Unless who knows what crazy thing happens in our world where suddenly we have to postpone or do it early. But regardless, definitely tune in for that, because if you even like Wavelab 1%, you're going to love it 100%, I'm sure, because Greg's going to show you everything there is to know. We have another. Actually, let's answer a lot of Donald's questions because he's got a few.
Okay.
How does iOS app Cubase IC help composers?
So the Cubase IC Pro is kind of like remote control. So you could come over there and you could, do like mixing, but a lot of composers use it because you have kind of a bank of buttons that could be assigned for firing off keyboard shortcuts. So if you wanted to have a whole bank of logical editor presets, you could just fire that off without having to memorize keyboard shortcuts.
Oh, great. So hopefully that answers. And Donald with the questions coming in. Here's another one. What does a composer do if they record audio and want to change pitch? I think
so we kind of did that with but we do have techniques called Vari Audio, and that will allow you to kind of be able to, for a monophonic source, be able to, convert it and kind of edit it very similar to MIDI. So if you have like a violin recording, you could do that, and you could actually take like a solo violin, extract it and turn it into MIDI, and then have like samples play along with it.
So, yeah, Donald, if you want, we kind of also showed how to do that in our last live stream from a couple weeks back. It's on our Facebook videos feed, and it's also on our YouTube page if you want to check that out. And there is a part that talks about how you can change the pitch in a multitude of different ways. So Donald, thank you for your questions. Glenn has more of a technical issue. He says, I have an older computer and Cubase program. The problem, they probably are not supported, but who can I contact for tech issues? I've been looking for answers. It's at Steinberg, maybe?
Yeah, if you go to if you're based in the US, you could just go to your My Steinberg account. And if you don't have one, just make one, and you could send a support request form. We also do live streams, like to help out customers with questions. And if you wanted to send a question, you could also reach me, and we could cover it perhaps in a hangout. So if you email clubcubase@steinberg.de, we could cover it and you could watch those hangouts on youtube.com/Cubase.
Additionally, he wanted to know who can help with older products, as well as he has an LE5 and would like to have someone help him with this issue. So basically, where can Glenn get any of his resources and help for any of his Cubase related issues?
Yeah, so go to Steinberg.net is the main corporate page, and then if you don't have a My Steinberg account, make one. It's just basically an email and a password that you make, and then you'll have a support request form, and that will send it directly to, like, if you're based in the US, to our US office, and our support office is in outside Indianapolis and Carmel, Indiana.
Great. So, Glenn, thank you for your questions. Because, like I said, every question's a good question, because if it helps you, it probably also helps somebody else.
Certainly.
So here's something. Oh, and by the way, I'm just going to throw this up here. because just in case you need the help going
And
forward.
Glenn, you might, make sure you enter because you might win a 10.5 Pro.
Yeah, so here's the link if you need any help with Steinberg as well. Just steinberg.net/en for English /support/usa.html. It's unfortunately not a clickable link, but you can pause the video and type it in verbatim. But let me pick a winner.
All right. So I found a drum roll sample this week. So
all right, so there we go. Ready? And our winner is, hold that drum roll. The winner is, just hold it down. I want like a real long drum roll.
I think I have to retrigger the sample in monophonic mode here.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good enough. And the winner is Josh Cates. Congratulations.
All right.
Josh Cates. You have been selected as the random winner of a license of Cubase Pro 10.5. You are getting the full shebang. Everything we've just talked about here and in every other Cubase related thing and any Cubase related thing going forward, you'll be able to do at home, and it's all yours for free.
Congratulations.
So, yeah.
Exciting.
So that's awesome. So Josh, congratulations on winning that. We are going to contact you. We have your email address. We're going to contact you about getting a license over to you for you to use. And yeah, congrats. I don't know what else to say. That's awesome. I'm jealous. You're going to have a lot of fun with this program. And now, if you really want, what I'd recommend is when you get the license, download it, and you can play at home. And whatever Greg does, you can try to do on your end. So, with all that being said, Greg, thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
It's always a treat because I'm learning, let alone just about Cubase stuff, but just about mixing in general and how to make the best mixes. And I'm not a composer, but now I have a little insight as to what my favorite composers do and use and how they get their stuff. Because to me, it seems like, how do they even make a score for a film? And now I'm like, oh, it's actually, I mean, it's probably still a tricky endeavor, but now I realize there are a lot of obstacles they can avoid doing this.
Mm-hmm. Now it's just up to the composing part.
Yeah. Exactly. So, this is one. Okay, so although we're about to wrap up, we still have questions coming in if you don't mind.
Sure.
So Josh is asking, how demanding is a current 10.5 version of Cubase on a system? I'm currently running Cubase Elements 8 on a laptop and want to upgrade, but don't want to upgrade the laptop just yet. So that's a valid question. Is the program, like, what I would recommend is having all your plugins and software on an external hard drive, but is the process of the software take up a lot of RAM on the computer?
Depending on what type of projects you're doing. So if you're doing like a 4,000 track template, then that's going to take a lot of RAM. But for my travel rig, I have just an i7 PC with 16 gigs of RAM, and it's about 7 years old now, maybe 8. And that's my main demo computer that I use all the time. So it's not a super fast computer, but Cubase runs great on it. I've gotten 100 tracks plus, without really breaking a sweat on an older laptop. So
great. No, that's good to know, and I'm sure Josh can rest easy. But speaking of Joshes in general, Josh Cates chimed in to say, and this is great to hear, that's so great. Thank you. I currently have the LE version. This is so much better. So that's awesome that we're giving this to an already, you have a Cubase user who's using it. And
that's what you get for hanging out with Sam Ash.
Yeah, there you go. So Josh, thanks for tuning in and checking it out, because now you're going to have all those things you wish you could have done with LE. You now have no other obstacles left. It's all there. You'll be able to do everything you wanted and more. It's going to be the full shebang. Again, we're going to figure out how to get that license to you. We're going to email you, whether it comes from me personally or whether it comes from the Steinberg team. I'm not sure. We're going to figure that out right after the show. But again, thank you, Josh, for entering. Thank you all for entering. I'm sorry some of you didn't win, but there's always chances to win prizes. We try to have a giveaway after every Cubase and every other live stream. We try to have something to give away to the audience. It doesn't always happen, but we appreciate you tuning in regardless. Before we go, though, Greg, do you have anything you'd like to say about the program or just life in general?
Well, I think during this time is a great time to learn a program while a lot of people are at home, and it's, so take the time and, learn some keyboard shortcuts, watch videos, and you could get up to speed with Cubase and, just be recording music and composing very fast.
Perfect. Yeah. And I will end by saying that if I could pull this up for you guys, we do have a resource center where you can ask us any questions you would like as far as any products we sell. Call 1-800-4-SAM-ASH. It's at the bottom of the screen right there. We are doing some financing for different things. We have 24-month for certain products, 48-month for, I believe now, Fender, Gretsch, and PRS products. Yamaha and Cubase products are also part of that financing as far as 24 months, if I'm not mistaken. But you can get all those details at samash.com. All of our stores are open. We are practicing social distancing. We are all wearing masks. We are all using sanitizer. We want you to feel safe coming into our stores. If you still don't feel safe, even after all of the measures we've done, we do also offer curbside pickup. So feel free to call us in advance, tell us what you need, pay over the phone, and we'll bring it right out to your car. It could be a pack of strings or it could be a full guitar and amp rig. Doesn't matter. We'll help you out. You can call us online, shop with us online, shop with us in store. If we have it in stock somewhere, we'll get it to you. I think that's my spiel as far as all things SAM-ASH, but definitely follow us and Cubase, or rather, excuse me, and Steinberg. But all Cubase products you can purchase at samash.com. Follow Steinberg on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow SAM-ASH Music on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Greg has his own show for Steinberg where he basically does a free-for-all. He'll talk about anything you guys want, and he's happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, we hope to see you at the next Cubase show in about 2 weeks, where we're going to discuss Wavelab. And so that should be very exciting because we're just building up all the momentum to some really great stuff. On that note, guys, Greg, thank you so much for being a part of this, as you always are gracious enough to do.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. And to all of you watching, thank you for tuning in this past hour. If you're rewatching this, thank you for taking the time to rewatch it, and hope you learned something. And feel free to communicate with us on socials and shop with us online and in store, and we hope to see you soon. Take care, guys.
Bye.